You know, every single time I see a story on the climate, it literally gets worse and worse. Like, it's never been, I read an article on this stuff and it's like, hey, good news. Good news. The temperature this year is good and the sea level rise is not happening. And never is that the case. It's always some terrifying shit. So first, let me give you this. Experts fear horrifying heat waves that could kill tens of thousands of people at once. We could have, quote, the Hurricane Katrina of extreme heat on our hands. By the way, this article's coming right on the heels of a colossal heat wave. They're dealing with one out west right now. They were dealing with one in Florida. Here we go. American cities are ill-suited for the heat. The asphalt and concrete that dominate our infrastructure mercilessly intensify it, driving outdoor temperatures in urban areas by up to an additional 20 degrees Fahrenheit on a hot afternoon. We can often ignore the fact we've trapped ourselves in metropolis-scaled frying pans thanks to air conditioning in our cars and homes. But the uptick in extreme weather attributed to climate change, plain old heat included, has continually put many cities' energy grids under threat. So what happens when all those AC units suddenly lose power? If a blackout hits during a blistering heat wave, an absolute catastrophe, according to experts in an op-ed piece for the New York Times written by Jeff Goodell, author of The Heat Will Kill You First. In one extreme scenario befalling an American city, over 10,000 people could die as the result of a single heat wave, sending hundreds of thousands more to the hospital. By the way, there was a massive heat wave in India and a bunch of people were dying. And it's like a tiny percentage of people in India that have AC to begin with. And so these are people who have built up more of a resistance to extreme heat, but even they were struggling and people were dying. And you're talking about, over 110 degrees for such an extended period of time and high humidity as well. And look, again, it doesn't take much. Extreme heat can lead to blackouts. Having a blackout that lasts for 2 days in extreme heat over 100-degree weather, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think? Goodell said that Mikhail Chester, director of the Metis Center for Infrastructure and Sustainable Engineering at Arizona State University, once likened such a scenario as the Hurricane Katrina of extreme heat, underscoring the vulnerability of American infrastructure to soaring temperatures. Those staggering figures come from a study published last year in the journal Environmental Science and Technology, which explored what would happen if a major 2-day blackout took place during a heat wave in Phoenix, Detroit, and Atlanta. Some 99% of buildings in Phoenix have AC, according to the study, which makes its power grid most likely to fail. Atlanta is just behind at 94%, and Detroit, the coolest city, ranked at 53%. In Phoenix, which last year went an entire month with temperatures of 110 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, Jesus, the death toll could be monumental. The study found that a whopping 800,000 people, half the capital's population, would need emergency medical care, and more than 13,000 would die. These figures were considerably lower for Atlanta and Detroit, which are cooler cities, but no less worrying. 6 people would die in Atlanta, the study estimated, and 221 in Detroit. According to the researchers, the number of major blackouts in the U.S. more than doubled between 2015, 16, and 2020 and 21, though not all were due to the climate. It doesn't really matter if the blackout is the result of a cyber attack or a hurricane, study lead author Brian Stone, director of the Urban Climate Lab at Georgia Tech, told the New York Times, for the purposes of our research, the effect is the same. Either way, hot temperatures do cause power grids to fail, and so we'll have some serious infrastructure overhauls to do, and perhaps changes in our power consumption habits to ensure that cities can withstand the heat. So, by the way, I think this happened once when I was a kid in New York. There was a massive blackout in the middle of the summer. I don't remember how long it lasted, but it's certainly on the table to have a massive blackout because of heat. And then what do? If it's 100 degrees or more for 2 days and the heat doesn't come back, and the AC doesn't come back on for that long. Older people, younger people, people who are ill-equipped to deal with it, it could be an absolute disaster. And now that's looking more and more likely. Again, we're seeing so many more heat waves, so many more as a result of climate change, so many more extreme weather events as a result of climate change. And that brings me to this, a comparison of June sea surface temperatures in active hurricane seasons. So, June 2005, obviously the redder it is, the warmer it is. June 2005, I think that was the Hurricane Katrina year. Look at this. See all the red. June 2010, even worse. Then we go all the way to 2023. It was horrible. June 2024, this is the worst it's ever been. This is the worst it's ever been in terms of ocean heat. Now, look, to be clear, it's not this alone that would lead to a bad hurricane season. There are other factors as well. I believe there's an element, something with the tides that would determine whether or not it would be a really bad hurricane season. But if certain factors fall into place, one of them being something with the tides, then this immense heat that's trapped in the Atlantic Ocean could lead to a historically horrific hurricane season, right? And again, the fear is this might be the new normal. We might not see a situation where we don't have outlier years anymore. Every year has been an outlier in terms of temperature, not just the water, but also the air temperature. Every year it's like, oh, this is off the charts in terms of how bad it is, in terms of how much the climate is changing. This could be the new normal. And the new normal might be hurricane seasons where you have 6, 7 disastrous Category 5 hurricanes that make landfall every year. I don't think people have truly wrapped their minds around the devastation that can come as a direct result of climate change. I haven't even touched on extended drought. I haven't even touched on famine. I haven't touched on increased flooding. There was some flooding the other day. I think it was in Austria, or there were a couple places that flooded horrifically. Florida's about to have a massive, massive rain event, which up to 5 inches in some places, which could lead to immense flooding. Things are changing, and they're changing rapidly, and they're changing for the worse. And we're the frog in boiling water, effectively. I mean, the fact that we're not even fully committed to going to a green grid, that's preposterous at this late date. I mean, even if you cut it all off tomorrow, you still have the residual effects, which could lead to bad climate effects. And it's like, we're not cutting it off tomorrow, and we're only committed to making it worse, and any measures we do are absolute half measures. And I don't envy the next generation or the one after that. I mean, we're in the midst of climate change right now. It's not just some future thing. It's happening right now. But it's only going to get worse and worse. And again, I haven't even brought up what happens when some places become literally unlivable, as many areas in the Middle East will. Then you have a massive refugee crisis, the likes of which we've never seen. It would dwarf Syrian refugee crisis, Iraq refugee crisis. It would dwarf that because entire regions might be unlivable, right? Could you imagine wars over water? It's not that far off in the future, bro. It's really not. Wars over food, the destabilization, man. But again, we're not taking it anywhere near as seriously as we should. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.